Hello everyone, my name is Eric Beard. I'm a solutions architect in the AWS Partner Network. Today I'm going to run through a quick screencast to accompany my blog post on how to use AWS CloudFormation to configure autoscaling for Amazon DynamoDB tables and indexes. First, what I'll do is I'll show you how this works in the console without CloudFormation, and then I'll show you the template that allows us to automate the process. So let's open the DynamoDB console and create a table. I'll call it myapp.user. I like to always put a prefix in front of my table names to avoid potential naming conflicts with other apps that might be hosted in the same account. I'll keep it simple and go with a string ID as the primary key. Note that autoscaling is enabled by default. It might take a few minutes for the table to be created. Here we can see the details for the autoscaling configuration on the table. The next thing I'll do is I'll create a global secondary index for this table. The use case in the blog post calls for the ability to sort users by sign-up date within a given city. When we create this index in the console, autoscaling is configured to match the settings for the table by default. So there we have it. We have created our table, added an index, and it's ready for use. But in a production environment, it's a good practice to avoid making changes in the console and instead script out your infrastructure so that it can be deployed automatically. I'll delete the table from the console and we'll start over with CloudFormation. Here I have a YAML template that I'm editing locally in VS Code. You can check out the accompanying blog post for a detailed explanation of the resources I'm creating. So I'll highlight a few points here in the YAML file. As you can see, we begin with a few parameters that allow you to change the name of the table and the index when you create the stack. Then we set up the user table. The basic configuration for the table includes a starting point for the provisioned write and read capacity units. Then I specify a role that autoscaling needs to modify resources on my behalf in response to changes that are triggered by CloudWatch events. And then we get to the point in the template where we're actually configuring autoscaling. In order to configure autoscaling, I have to create what's called a scalable target and a scaling policy. In the scalable target, I'm setting the minimum and maximum capacity, and in the scaling policy, I'm setting the target consumption percentage, along with the cooldown timing. The 70 represents the target percentage of the provisioned capacity. I want the consumed capacity for writes on the table to be 70% of the currently provisioned maximum. And if the consumption goes over 70%, autoscaling should adjust the provisioned capacity upwards. You'll notice some repetitive sections in this template. The reason is that we need to configure read and write scaling separately for the table, and then we also have to configure scaling for the index separately. One thing I want to point out here in the scalable target for the index is the resource ID for the index. This is actually what prompted me to write the blog post in the first place, because I struggled to figure out how to do this the first time that I had to write a template for autoscaling. The resource ID for a global secondary index is table/table/name/index/index name. And you can see that I'm using the sub shorthand, plugging in the parameter values from the top of the file. And that's it. It's a relatively short template. And now I'll show you how to create a stack based on this template. I go to the CloudFormation console and click the Create Stack button. I'll upload the template. And then on the next screen, I have the options to specify different names for the table and the index. Choose Next. The following screen has a few optional configuration details. Choose Next. And then finally, I have to acknowledge that the template may create IAM resources in my account. Select the checkbox, and then I choose Create. And just a note here, I've been cheating a bit with the video and skipping ahead. Some of these actions can take a little while to complete. Now we navigate back to the DynamoDB console and see the same table that I had created earlier has been reproduced as a part of the stack that I just created. You also have the option to create a stack from the command line. Here I show the syntax for the command that does basically the same thing that we just accomplished in the console. So there you have it. DynamoDB autoscaling with CloudFormation. I hope this has been helpful. Hit me up in the comment section or on the forums if you have any questions.